And we are live. Welcome to the stream, everybody. For anyone that's tuning in for the first time, this is the Vanguard live streams, and I'm Gavin.
And I'm Zach. What's up, everybody? Today we're super excited to be speaking with Joy Marie Mann, otherwise known as Savage Joy. But before we do, we wanted to give a shout out, as always, to our Patreons who support, or our patrons. Patreons. I'm an old man. To our patrons who support us on Patreon.
Our patrons on Patreon. Here they are, the wonderful individuals that are, lending either one to a slightly more of their monthly dollars to our cause. Supporting a leftist YouTube channel that does get fucked by the YouTube algorithm. I'm sure our guest today can relate because she is also a YouTube progressive host. In fact, the host of Unruly Hour with Savage Joy. And she was also one of the speakers, I believe actually the first speaker at the Force the Vote town hall, which we recently saw, which featured all the, major players in the Force the Vote movement, from Jimmy Dore to Brianna Joy Gray, Dr. Cornel West. All of the greatest and brightest stars of the movement, in my opinion, at least, were there. And I was just immediately struck watching that town hall, even as someone, who does advocate relentlessly and has for a while now for a universal health care. I was just struck by, how intense and emotional the stories shared by Joy, and I believe his name was Scott, were at the beginning of the town hall. Truly a reminder to us all why we're in this fight and why we're not just going to give up this fight, now that a Democrat is in office and Donald Trump is on his way out, or, now he is out. So without further ado, we will add to the stream Joy Marie Mann, aka Savage Joy. How's it going today?
Hey, how are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're super excited to chat with you. Thanks for taking some time out of your night to speak with us.
Right on. And so, I apparently look topless, so let's do that.
No, I mean, I don't think you look topless.
But it's a bohemian show.
Yeah, there you go. We're all leftists here. It's okay.
Yeah.
No, That's how I'm going to do my show from now on. Patrons, go to Savage Joy.
There you go. There you go. Drive up that support.
It's like an OnlyFans / progressive talk show.
Gavin talked a lot about doing a lateral move to OnlyFans. If YouTube ever kicks us off, we've thrown out a lot of names. Naked politics, no pants politics, the naked truth. We've got options.
Oh, I'm not wearing pants. I'm ready to go. That's why I like the, camera from here up. Works well.
That's the stay-at-home way. That's the work-from-home maneuver.
Absolutely.
Well, Joy, it's an interesting day that you're joining us because, when I messaged you to see if you would want to come on, I wasn't exactly or necessarily anticipating that we would be doing this on the day of Joe Biden's inauguration and Donald Trump's, absconsion from Washington, D.C. back to Florida, where he's now probably going to reside for at least the near future. And just in the context of the conversation we're having today about, the Medicare for all, the fight for Medicare for all, and, the Force the Vote movement, it's just an interesting, place to get your perspective. Again, now that we do have a Democrat in office, some people are going to assume that, the fight is over. We can go back to brunch, as they say, or go back to sleep. We can stop exerting activist pressure now because everything's fine. What's your reaction to people that are saying, sentiments of that ilk?
I think they should probably read Pat and my book, because we kind of anticipated that, and that's why we even wrote our political parody, to discuss the absurdity and privilege of people who think like that. For like white men or even a lot of white women, things like going back to normal are cool with them because nothing is going to change regardless of who's in office. They're just not going to have to worry about complaining about the big orange man. But in reality, people of color, LGBTQ people, these people, there is no normal to get back to. Their normal is healthcare violence, unhousing violence, no food on the table, unemployed, one $600 stimulus that many of us haven't gotten. So to say go back to normal is very, it's like Obama nostalgia. Oh my God, he was handsome. He spoke well. And I think that's why so many people voted for Joe, because they have that, oh, everything was just so great then. He was so poised. And I mean, forget about what he was doing behind the scenes. He's just, that's what I want to go back to. This isn't our America. And like, yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and I think that's something that we're going to have to be grappling with a lot as a left in the near future, and for frankly the entirety of the Joe Biden presidency now that it's here. Because, and this is something Gavin and I were discussing a little bit this morning, right? You know, frankly, Donald Trump just was doing such a terrible job that it's going to be very easy for mainstream media to sort of hype Joe Biden in his first 100 days, right? You know, his level of competence is going to be markedly higher when it comes to things like vaccine rollout. He's shown, a willingness to actually, tackle this, whereas Donald Trump completely abdicated. However, he shows no sign of going anywhere above what might be considered, anywhere near that what would be considered adequate, right? What he's, saying he's willing to do is, stop the whatever 4,000 people a day that are dying from COVID-19, but he's completely unwilling to extend that logic to the people who are uninsured and sick with countless other viruses. I'm just wondering, as the left strategizes moving forward, how do we articulate that, yes, Joe Biden may be more competently addressing this COVID-19 pandemic than Donald Trump, but how do we continue to underscore the utter inadequacy that even his, better, legislation and better leadership are, but still just not good enough?
Well, one day last week, I decided that, throughout so much thought, especially because of having such little eyesight, it was a big decision. But I decided that I'm going to write another book. And this book is because when I did Force the Vote and 140,000 people saw my story and it just blew up, I was kind of bombarded with these heartbreaking stories of, people sharing what I'm going through. So I thought, I'm writing another book, and it's going to be a compilation of people who are, struggling monetarily, who are, filing medical bankruptcy, who are, lost healthcare with the loss of a job, who go to Canada so they can get their insulin, things like this. And I'm hoping that with the writing of this under a so-called Democrat, that people will, look at it as not just percentages and, statistics, but they'll see, holy shit, like there are so many stories. This isn't an isolated incident. This is violence, what is happening to these people. So I just decided nothing like that has been done. It needs to be done. And I'll send it to every damn rep if I have to. I really don't care. Because I don't know where else to go at this point. I think appealing with personal stories, I saw, fortunately, the power of that. And I'm nobody special. My story is not more important than anyone else's. So I feel like other people deserve that opportunity to just, have a voice.
Yeah, I think that's a great plan, to put together a volume of people's stories that really could push the conversation. Because as I said, even as someone who advocates relentlessly for universal healthcare, hearing your story in painstaking detail was a great reminder of why we fight in the first place. So yeah, I think that's an awesome idea. And I think you're absolutely correct too, to, in your redefining of healthcare crimes as violence, as, homeless people, that's a violent experience that's state sponsored. And when people begin to understand it as such, I think then that's when people start to really understand the necessity of, third party movements, of things like that may seem so abstract and crazy to them, that they don't even consider until they're really, pummeled with reality. And then it forces those, those thoughts to happen, those conversations to be had. So obviously that's really important work you're doing. And, thank you. One other question I had for you, and I know you were one of the, leaders or originators necessarily of the movement, Force the Vote, but as a prominent, advocate for it, I guess, do you have any reflections on the movement or the demand? Is there anything that you think maybe could have been handled better about it, or if there's another opportunity that you would, do differently if that was in your power? Or do you think that overall it was as successful as it could have been?
It's so difficult to say because I am pleased with what I did, and I am pleased with the majority of what others did. I did, I've been incredibly disappointed by some people I thought were comrades the past few weeks. I've learned that not everybody really is about the issues. A lot of people, after Force the Vote, when you have 140,000 views, Medicare for All should have been trending. It wasn't. A man's name was trending. It was superseded by one person. Now, whether he tried to or not, that's, whatever. That's not the point. The point is that people were focusing on the shiny object rather than the fact that this is like a legit strategy. We are trying to get people healthcare, and at the very least, not just that, but have these people stick to what they promised to do. And I thought that's what we were about. I thought it was no middle ground. I thought it was, nobody's an idol. We need to hold everyone accountable to what they've said. And then suddenly it's, you're being divisive. And, I was physically threatened, for going to DC. I'm in Pennsylvania, and I had my friend take me to DC to speak at the protest, and I was physically threatened that someone was going to fight me there. And I was like, really? Just for telling me? And it was someone from DSA. And it just perplexes me so much that I've been getting a lot of hate, directed at me. And I'm like, dude, I literally just shared my story. I don't know why you hate me. Jimmy did not invite me to speak. I never talked to him. I didn't even know it was going to be on his show. I had no idea about any of this stuff. I was reached out to by Nick Brana and Ryan Knight. That, literally the day before. So, being called a grifter and a Jimmy Dore minion and all this. I'm like, I don't even follow him on Twitter. What are you talking about?
That's totally horseshit. And I'm enraged on your behalf. And I think it's just a real reflection of the obfuscation and the cognitive gymnastics and the, frankly, just ideological fragmenting that occurs between people who are just so steeped in a certain perspective, right? And they're putting personality over politics, right? Gavin and I say this on the show all the time. I do not care what you think about Jimmy Dore's personality. Force the Vote was a good idea. It was a good strategy. And that's why a lot of other really smart people got on board with it, right? That's why you saw somebody who is as credentialed and as moral as Dr. Cornel West, right? That's why you saw Brianna Joy Gray, these most principled, as Cornel West calls them, truth seekers, right? These people who, Gavin and I are the first people that we look to, in times for moral clarity, somebody like Dr. West, right? So I think that the total pivot to make this a like you said, shiny object politics to, defame one individual who, maybe had questionable behavior because they're a fucking nightclub comedian. Is that what the left has become? Behavior police? I thought we were about policy, and it's so frustrating and outrageous to see somebody who, was as courageous as you were in sharing what is a very personal and vulnerable story in front of, as you said, 140,000 people. Gosh, I'm do this every day, and that would make me terrified. So
oh, I was shaking. I took 3 Ativans.
I wouldn't have done it at all. I would have been like, "Hey guys, sorry." I would, So yeah, and just to see people or to hear that people are reacting that way, it's just so shameful and disgraceful. And I do apologize that you've had to deal with that. That's completely outrageous and uncalled for.
I would do it again. You know what I mean? It's just, it's unfortunate that, we are learning a lot about people we've known online for a few years. And the amount of shit lib, attacks they're using, the same attacks we've, railed against for 4 years. Like, you idolize someone, okay, Bernie bro, like, you are acting exactly like the epitome of the people we have totally, just verbally destroyed for 4 years. So it's been disappointing, but at the same time, like, I've felt, such a connection to so many people I've met in the past few weeks, and it's been inspiring at the same time. So, being able to meet Brianna and speak with Brother Cornell and stuff like this is huge, and they're not going to take that from me.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying too. We covered the force the vote thing pretty heavily on this channel, and as Zac mentioned, we were, completely pro force the vote. But it is true that we found ourselves, talking about Jimmy Dore way more than we ever would have thought we would have at the outset of the whole thing. It did become, kind of twisted from a policy conversation where originally, in fact, a lot of people were in agreement about it. And then over the next week or two, it seemed like it really morphed into this debate about Jimmy Dore. Is he a grifter? Is he toxic?
Yeah, Jimmy Dore versus AOC specifically,
yeah.
Right? Because the squad always also gets reduced down to AOC.
Exactly.
It's a way of limiting the scope of the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And it really was annoying to me because, again, I was trying to defend the strategy on its merits, but it felt like, I don't stand up for everything that Jimmy Dore's ever said. I don't, agree with all of his strategies. This happened to be one place where he was 100% right, I thought at least. And Zac and I, acted accordingly. However, I do think it resulted in some unnecessary fissures too in the left, and this is something else we covered. I'm all for exposing charlatans and frauds, and there are certain people in the progressive media community that I do consider to be just that, and those people should be exposed. However, I do think that what was that?
Jank.
We did a whole video exposing TYT with Robbie Yeager, a journalist who went deep into their corruption, $20 million from a Clinton donor, all that insanity. But at the same time, what I was saying is, not everyone was a fraud in that situation, and I think that a lot of unnecessary division occurred and some unnecessary, I'm struggling for the right word, but
fracturing.
Yeah, fracturing, and I hope that the next, and again, as someone who supported force the vote, I hope that the next time, if there is a next time, it can be handled with a little bit more of an eye towards left unity, because we are already very fractured. We are already a very minority coalition as it is. I mean, we're not even enough to take over the Democratic Party. We saw that with Bernie Sanders' movement. And obviously he was up against, the DNC and the establishment. So that's not exactly fair to say. But yeah, how do you think it could have been handled in a way maybe to reduce the amount of leftist infighting, that left on left violence that has proven to be somewhat destructive, in my opinion, at least? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I am still kind of blown away by the amount of AOC like worshiping. I didn't really notice that until like the past 3 weeks. It's very like, even if you have a legit criticism, she's gonna be the next Bernie. It's like, he's been fighting longer than she's been alive. Let's not go there. No. That's why I purposely put in my speech, I had a AOC on my show. She gave me her word she was going to fight for this. I've had Ro Khanna on my show 4 times. He's given me his word. Rashida Tlaib cried with me and held me as I shared my story. Like, I made it personal. This isn't just politics for those of us who are thousands in debt and nowhere near done. So I think, I don't necessarily think Force the Vote could have done anything different, except our protest was not publicized at all.
Yeah.
That definitely, there were so many people who afterwards said, I had no idea this was happening. But other than that, I think it would be something that I would really encourage leftists to take a look at themselves when they, she's not like this, like, great next hope. She's the person who said she was an activist. She's the person who showed a picture of her shoes with holes in them and said, this is activism. I've gone door to door to earn your vote. That's who we helped get elected. And we may not be her constituents, but we got her elected. So that's are you a progressive if you don't fight for the things that you told we the people you would fight for? I mean, that's up for people to decide, but I do, and this isn't tone policing. I really don't care if people do it themselves. However, I chose to not do hashtag fraud squad, things like that.
Yeah,
I chose to stay away from it. I don't want to make it sensationalized. I have legitimate concerns with what they did. And I feel like if I also didn't say Jimmy's name once on Twitter. I wanted to stick to issues and just focus. So if we do something like this again, I hope people kind of stick to Medicare for all.
Well, we have to be able to at least see it coming next time, right? Because I have a feeling that every time there's any kind of push for left activism, especially on Twitter, and this is a broader conversation about tech empire that we can talk about on another show. But I mean, when you're dealing with these monopolistic powers that are just so able to manipulate. I've been reading Shoshana Zuboff, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, right? So it's on my mind. The way that they're able to manipulate not only what is being talked about, but like predict what's going to be talked about, and then push the buttons to be able to steer the conversation away from that. They are able to do that in a way that none of us would be comfortable with if we had a better understanding of. And I'm just starting to kind of come to the understanding that is what is going to happen, right? They are going to pinpoint it onto one controversial figure that is going to generate controversy, that is going to get more clicks, more likes, generate more of your time that you're staring at Twitter. That's kind of their game, right? That's how they monetize their platforms. They sell that data that they're getting to corporations who then sell us shit, right? But I think that if we're going to learn anything from this, what we have to learn is that, those are all distractions. Those are all things that are irrelevant to the policy, right? And if we're ever going to be successful with a broad populist movement, and Gavin and I have been pretty, vocal in our support for the movement for a People's Party, we think a broad, progressive, popular strategy is the movement forward, largely for American politics. If that's going to happen, we're going to need to not compromise on our values, but we are going to need to be more focused along the lines of specific policy, because there's always going to be that tonal, fissure, I guess, if we let it be there.
Absolutely. It was really, kind of fascinating, but yet infuriating to see people who are like, I hate Pelosi, she has to go. Now be like, they elected Pelosi. And it's like, wait, what? Listen to yourself. You're actually like, we told you so, and taking excitement and pride from the fact that we just reelected someone you supposedly loathe.
At that point, you need to just take your phone and shove it in the garbage disposal. Like, you've been spending too much time on Twitter, right? Like,
yeah, and guilty, but social media has it's an interesting animal.
it's all how you use it.
But you can also meet pretty amazing people. So
for sure,
yeah, it's all a matter of curation. I think with social media, it's easy to get a lot of horse shit, but if you follow the right people and kind of have a good group of followers and all that, it can be a really positive experience. And especially in the pandemic, it's a tool I've used to connect a lot with the outside community, especially the leftist activist community. And just for the sake of the show, I stay connected, for news and to pull articles and just get the vibe. So I think there's definitely something to be said for that. I did want to get your reaction too. We're talking about Medicare for all and what Joe Biden can or cannot do. And today he did release, this list of executive actions. It looks like, the majority of them are mostly just undoing stuff that Donald Trump did. But it looks like 17 in all that he's planning on signing. This was, 6 hours ago. So some of them may have already been signed. But I was just wondering if you had any specific reactions to any of these specific executive actions. And, obviously, I don't think that they go far enough. And obviously, there's a lot of executive actions like canceling student loan debt or taking cannabis off of the controlled substance list, which are still doable and which we still have yet to pressure Biden to do. But I'm just wondering if you have any initial thoughts.
I saw an article that came out either last night or this morning in which now Joe is not even going to have a public option, which is not fantastic to begin with. But he's giving subsidies to, big pharma and big insurance and things like that. My issue is when people give things like this credit. Oh, well, it's going to be better than Trump and it could be worse. And I don't give a shit. He's not getting credit from me. Like, I didn't vote for his ass. Now it's on you guys to freaking get him to move left. As you said, like, I'm not giving anyone credit for something they should be doing anyway. People were talking about, the Keystone Pipeline. I'm in Pennsylvania. It's a huge deal. But I'm not going to praise him if he does, cancel it, because he's still got Raytheon on his board and shit like that. So it doesn't negate his shit ideas and shit people he works with just because he does one thing. Mm-hmm. It doesn't negate the fact that activists were telling him to stop taking fossil fuel money, and he said, go vote for someone else. Like, these things are not negated by one thing. And I think, these things are going to be used as people who say, look what he's already done. What a champ. And we're just supposed to,
go back to bed.
Yes.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Like, remember when we said no middle ground?
Yeah. I think you're so correct. And again, as Zac mentioned earlier, it's like Trump just set the bar so damn low that all Biden essentially has to do is undo a handful of, Trump's most insidious shit, like, the Muslim ban, which I didn't even realize was still actually in effect. I thought that was struck down. I thought that was struck down 2 years ago or something, but apparently that was still going on. So, well, I mean, not that anyone's really entering the country right now. So I guess, whatever, but still, just by undoing some of those truly odious and, undeniably horrific things that Trump did, the Keystone XL, the Paris Climate, just by undoing some of that, he is going to get all this credit, which is totally undue. And Zac and I have obviously acknowledged that there is some level of difference between the Biden and Trump administration, but I think you're correct that, Biden absolutely still has the Raytheon on his side. He still has all the special interests. He still took more money from healthcare insurers than literally any other candidate in the Democratic Party. And that's why pretty much all of corporate America lined up behind him when the time came to, get Bernie out of the way. So I think that you're absolutely correct. We can't, fall into that trap of, patting him on the back for doing the bare fucking minimum.
Yeah, 100%. And Joy, one of my, questions for you is I have limited memory, right, of the 2008 kind of inauguration of Barack Obama and Joe Biden. But from what I, gather is that it was people were relatively pissed off about George Bush at the time, and he was extremely unpopular, just like Donald Trump is now. And it seems like it was the exact same formula that you're mentioning of everybody giving Barack Obama credit for these like paltry, 10% measures that were extreme handouts, not prosecuting any of the executives at places like AIG, just giving massive bailouts across the board to executives, bonuses, the likes, compromising at the beginning and never fighting for a single payer system, never fighting for a public option, giving them a mild version of like a slightly to the left of a Republican healthcare plan. If you want to argue that, really, it's just Mitt Romney's, healthcare plan, a slightly diluted, rebranded as a compromise bill. I mean, it seems like it's history destined to repeat itself, right? Joe Biden sleeping his way with these neoliberal policies. Do you think that he does anything differently than Barack Obama, or do you think we're just in for another 4 years of stasis?
I think the major difference, well, first of all, he's sure as hell not well spoken like Obama was.
Right.
But
he's not handsome either.
I think one of the major differences, well, first of all, we have the interwebs now. It's a lot more online. We can find information. We are way more aware now than many of us were in 2008. But I think the biggest difference is that Obama duped so many of us. I mean, he was this populist, hope and change. Like, I was all about him.
Yeah, that's like everyone calls Donald Trump a faux populist, but Obama was almost just as much, if not more, of a faux populist.
Absolutely. And I think the major difference this time is that you were not duped by Joe. He has 40 years of complete garbage record. So he did not dupe you. He didn't, convince you of anything. You knew who you were voting for. I don't vote shame. That was your choice. But when you try to shame people and say you should have voted for him or this and that, that's where I have an issue, because we all know he's not going to do shit. Maybe one or two little things here or there, but we need to keep be realistic, and a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are having buyer remorse right now, and it's kind of like, what the hell did you expect to happen?
Yeah, and I think I can provide a little bit of insight into that because, Gavin and I disagreed about this on the show a bit. I did vote for Joe Biden. But with a very clear head about it, I felt like if I was going to vote for Joe Biden, I wanted two things that I thought I was going to get, which was an end to the Saudi-led genocide and U.S. support for the Saudi-led genocide in Yemen, and I thought that he would get back in the Iran nuclear deal, and I was like, I'm going to plug my nose and do it with just this. Never in my wildest dreams did I assume that he was going to be this next fucking FDR. No matter what Vox News had to say about it, right? Like it's just like obvious to me at this point. So, I think no matter what, everybody was left with a sort of sense of like, what now, right? Because I don't think we're in any better position if Donald Trump has been reelected, other than the fact is that we're just reminded, oh my God, we are so fucked. I think that regardless now, the left needs to understand that as we move forward, we can't allow ourselves to be put in that position again. We can't allow ourselves to have our only option be Joe Biden or Donald Trump, or Joe Biden versus Tucker Carlson, or Kamala Harris versus Tom Cotton, or somebody fucking horrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but also, what do you think is going to happen with that? Do you think that the Trump wing is going to remain kind of the dominant faction of the Republican Party? Do you think he's going to start the Patriot Party, third party that he's been floating? Or do you think that the elite Republicans are kind of be able to quell, the Trump, whatever you want to call it?
I think he's still going to have his fans. Heart's back. I think he's still definitely going to have his fan base. But it seems kind like a lot of the Republicans are like, we don't have to be nice to him anymore because he's not in office. Like Pence went to Biden's thing today, which was interesting, and didn't go to Trump's thing. And so I think a lot of them might actually start, separating themselves because they don't feel obligated anymore. So I could see that happening. I think he's desperately going to try to remain relevant, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does try to run Ivanka or Eric Trump Jr. or, one of his annoying fascist kids. But at the same time, I don't think he has the momentum to start a third party nor the knowledge how.
Yeah, or just the willingness. He's a lazy piece of shit. He governed
He
like
really
what, 4 years.
Well, if he does start a third party, it'll most likely just be kind of a scam, a way to raise more money and then never deliver on the promises, just like everything in his entire
like the
career.
Steve Bannon build a wall, GoFundMe shit,
Yeah, exactly. That's the perfect example. Pretty much the same kind of thing. Like whatever happened to all that money? Did they ever what did they build a fucking fence in like Steve Bannon's backyard or something?
He got pardoned, so it doesn't matter what the fuck he did with that money.
Well, they actually sued to get it refunded to all the people because they were like millions of dollars.
It was $25 million or something crazy.
Yeah, we should set up instead of the fund the wall, we should do like a fund like healthcare for people that actually need fucking help. Like imagine how much $25 million could have actually helped people. You know what I'm saying? If there was that same kind of energy on the opposite side.
Although at the end of the day, that $25 million would help people while enriching the fucking.
That's true. That's true.
That's very true. A bitter pill to swallow.
Still, the sentiment remains on the extreme right. That's what they're throwing their money to. Or on the extreme left, obviously we would, hope I hope fund something that could actually help people. By the way, thanks so much, Scalisi, for that super sticker. Really appreciate that contribution.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of my final questions for you, Joy, was just what do you want to see from the activist community? Now that the force the vote has ended, do you want to see another attempt at forcing the vote? Do you foresee in the future? I mean, it almost sucks, right? This was the most leverage that it feels like the left is going to have for the foreseeable future. So something would almost have to be constructed. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the future of putting the pedal to the metal and getting people healthcare? How do we force it back into the face of our politicians?
I'm having Lee Camp back on my show in 2 weeks. He came out with something 1 or 2 days ago, something force the vote-ish to do with Biden. So we'll get into that more so we can, talk about the details and such. But I think it has inspired, some, kind of ideas of unconventional ideas. But at this point, I'm kind of open to trying anything just because, I don't have a lot of hope, honestly. Seeing Uncle Bernie today sitting in that chair with his mittens just about destroyed me. And he is far from an idol, but as much as he pisses me off, I love that effort so much. And it kills me that we're never going to have another chance to have a Bernie. So...
Why do you say that, by the way? Why do you not think that's a possibility?
Or do you just mean because he's old?
He's 79. Yeah.
Okay, so you don't mean that there couldn't be a reincarnation of the same sort of movement?
I don't believe so. And the fact is the people they try to compare to Bernie are just, it's absurd. I don't know of anyone else who has a 40-year track record of activism and being a humanist and things like that. And someone who literally created a movement of millions of people, created millions of activists, woke millions of people up, brought things like Medicare for all and Green New Deal to people's kitchen tables. Whether you like him or hate him, you got to respect your roots. This man changed politics forever.
Yeah,
No
no
doubt.
denying that. There's no denying that. And that's why here at the Vanguard, we share some of your frustrations with his strategy. And obviously we have, wishes about how he maybe should have stayed in the primary a lot longer than he did. But I'm in agreement that, here at the Vanguard, we respect the man for his legacy, for ushering in pretty much the biggest wave of socialist, progressive energy in decades, frankly, and the fact that he was able to accomplish as much as he was cannot be underscored, especially considering what he was up against in the establishment media, the establishment Democratic Party, pretty much the entire political establishment at large. So I agree with that. I guess I'm maybe a little bit more optimistic that another candidate can hopefully recapture that coalition and that energy. But you are correct that he was so unique in the fact that he had the track record to prove it. He had the votes to, never taking a cent of money. He was an independent, not a Democrat. Like these were qualities that I agree probably will not resurface in a viable candidate.
Cornell West 2024.
There you go.
Oh, bring it. Brother Cornell. Yes.
He would be like 72. He'd be ripe to run for president.
He is, oh man, just if he dances, he has my vote. That's it. Like,
oh, 100%. That would be amazing. I even remember people were saying maybe he should, run as a Green Party candidate, and I thought that was a great idea too. And do you think that MPP or Green Party, do you think there's any validity to such electoral strategies? Or I mean, I know you're not a Democrat, so I assume that the answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on board with MPP. Yeah, you know me. But the Green Party, I have voted Green. Angela Walker is a dear friend.
Yeah, we love Angela Walker.
Yeah, she was actually our first ever guest on this program, by the way. Or Howie Hawkins was. Howie and Angela were our very first guests ever in the program. And I proudly voted for them. Yeah, no, they're great, especially Angela.
She is just a badass. Yeah. So I do love some Green people, and I have voted Green before. However, I don't see the viability in building them at this point. A lot lacks in organizational skills. I'm not talking about certain cities or something. I'm talking about as a whole, and I'm sure I'm gonna get so much shit for this.
Oh no, we see that all the time here. We literally said that so many times throughout the course of the campaign. And again, I voted for Howie and Angela, and I relentlessly critiqued the Green Party's strategy. Obviously, I wish they would have.
Run somebody who hadn't lost 26 times in a row every single election they'd ever run.
Yeah, especially when they had someone in Jesse Ventura who was actually trying to bring prominence and energy and celebrity to their cause, something that they will probably never, have the opportunity to have again. So I just thought that was pretty disgraceful. Obviously I wasn't there, I wasn't behind the scenes or whatever, but I lost. I was like, you're not serious about winning, then why are you asking for money? You know what I'm saying? And again, I voted for them, but.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of see, that happening again in the future. I think that MPP is a great idea. I think it's desperately needed. But above all else, whether you support it or don't support it, let's get fucking ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
On, the rosters, let's because unless and until we do that, it doesn't matter whether we support Green or MPP or it doesn't matter. We need ranked choice voting to even, have viability in any options. Once we would get that, we can even create yet another party. But unless and until it's just not feasible to win on a grand scale. Locals, absolutely. But to have an overall, a president or something like that, ranked choice voting before we need to be real.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think that's a valid, I think that's definitely valid. I guess at the same time, I don't think that we should just wait around for the, Democrat or the establishments to give us that before we run. Because I agree, and I don't want people wasting their money, time, and energy on chaotic cause, right? But I also don't want to wait around for the establishment to give us ranked choice voting in order to give us the okay to run third parties, right? So it's obviously a catch-22 that's set up intentionally by the political establishment to prevent third party insurgency. And, frankly, kind of embarrassingly, I guess, I continue to just come back on the same solution, which is you just run someone like Jesse Ventura that people actually know about and that will, get his name out there and force the media to cover them, because I literally can't think of anything else, any other way to kind of overcome the media and the duopoly and how it's, manifested itself in our thinking, again, in our media and everything. But obviously there's a lot of, pioneering to be done, a lot of innovation to be done in that respect. And I think that the guys of the People's Party and gals are obviously, doing a lot of that hard work. We still have yet to see what success they have. I mean, obviously they have yet to run a candidate. Again, not being naive here, but definitely interested to see what they are thinking about. And also, I totally agree. General strike, probably also equally, essential as far as getting shit done. That's something we talk about all the time on this show.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm hoping that people are still going to be in the streets after today.
Yeah, well, and I mean,
back.
In addition to that, we've seen, people take to the streets and have nothing delivered to them, right? I mean, George Floyd was, and Breonna Taylor, and also just the broader movement for justice for Black lives saw an outpouring of support unlike anything we'd seen, at least since the civil rights movement. And yet we've had Joe Biden inaugurated. He immediately gave a backhanded slap to the civil rights leaders. We remember the leaked audio. He repeatedly, peddled the lie that, the defund the police somehow handicapped him in the election. All those kinds of things.
Made a cop a VP.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Actually appointed a
top of biggest state in the country. Yeah, it's disgraceful.
So it's not. It's almost as if that's not even enough at this point, right? The people are just going to be beaten and belittled and met with military force for exercising their right to protest. Even under the Joe Biden administration. So
yeah, thanks for that super chat, Jay Bird. Really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thanks, Jay Bird.
Thank you.
But I guess it's just so we don't keep you for the rest of your night. Gavin, did you have any final questions that you wanted to wrap with?
I guess my only question to you, Joy, is: do you have anything you want to tell our viewers about? Any besides the book you mentioned? If you want to maybe tell people
check
about
out the Yass Kween Chronicles as well as
and
the upcoming book that you mentioned.
Yeah, let anyone know about where to follow you, where to stay connected, where to watch your show, because it seems like everyone in the comments has really enjoyed this conversation, and some of these are probably your viewers, but if anyone is watching that maybe not, where can they check out your stuff?
So this is the political parody, Pat the Burner, aka Peter Douche, aka Nate Sliver, who sends his regards, by the way. That's our book. We have people like Nira Tantrum and Alyssa Shalano, Nancy Pagosi, and all of our favorite shit libs that we just completely destroy. Yes, savageandpat.com. You can pick one of us to sign. He's in California. I'm in Pennsylvania, and we've never met. So we sign, you can pick one of us to sign.
There you go.
But yeah, so you can get that there. The email for you to send your healthcare stories is healthcareviolence@mail.com. My show is on Roar Media Live, ROAR. It's a new org we started to highlight streams with women and people of color. And then I also have my own YouTube with over 300 past episodes of my shows on Savage Joy Marie Mann. Patreon, Savage Joy Marie Mann, all that fun stuff. Oh, Twitter is @SavageJoyMarie1.
Awesome.
Sweet. Well, we really enjoyed speaking to you today, Savage. And again, as a big fan of your satirical works, and also just so moved by your story at the Force the Vote town hall. It was just great to meet finally over streaming or whatever you want to call it. But it was great to talk and share this dialogue, and hopefully people found it constructive, and hopefully the next time there's another, big movement in the style of Force the Vote, hopefully we get, a little bit more success, more results. Again, not to, everyone, did a great job with that. And I'm not trying to, no shade or anything, but hopefully next time it can be even more flawless.
Next time our politicians listen to us. Yeah, I hope that too.
Yeah.
Joy, thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to come on our show. We really appreciated talking to you, and thanks for fighting the good fight and sharing your story. It's extremely powerful, and the work you do is important.
Thank you guys so much. It was a blast. I love speaking with you.
Yeah, we look forward to doing it again at some point soon. And absolutely. Well, we wish you the best of luck with everything going forward, and speak to you next time, Savage. Joy.
Be well.
Same. Much love.
Cool. And to anyone that's still listening, stick around. Zach and I are probably going to hang out here for a little bit longer. We have a few more stories we wanted to talk about, a little bit more shit to be talked. So again, I wanted to say super thanks to Jaybird D for that super chat. We do really appreciate the support, guys. And if you want to hit up that Patreon link too, even better way to support the show. But yeah, we had a great conversation with Savage Joy, and we thank her again for her time tonight. It was just such a fun conversation. And again, follow her on Twitter. I put that in the description. Check out that book, everything of that nature. Support fellow leftists, support everyone. So yeah, thanks for watching that interview. And Zach, what in particular did you want to get to tonight next?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I did want to, I guess we could talk a little bit more about, strategy in Obama and Biden, or I said Obama, I meant Biden. Jesus Christ, I'm losing it. But one of the main things I actually wanted to talk about was this piece that Glenn Greenwald put up the other day called "The New Domestic War on Terror is Coming." And this was just something that we didn't get to in our stream yesterday that I wanted to talk about because, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast stream with Joy, I've been really sucked into this Shoshana Zuboff book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, and it's really long and it's taken me a while, so you guys are going to hear about it a lot for the next 2 weeks. But one of the things that I've just found increasingly interesting, and I want to talk about before we get into this new domestic war on terror under a Democrat, right? Because Silicon Valley has been basically capitalized and made profitable largely by Democrats, right? Largely by people who support the Democratic Party, who came up in this Clintonian neoliberal vision, right? And I just want to read this quick excerpt from Shoshana Zuboff's book, just to kind of set the stage for the conversation that we're about to be having about Sheryl Sandberg, who was a former advisor to Larry Summers, who was U.S. Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton and now is a key advisor to Joe Biden. But back in 2008, just 3 months after having to... So let me just actually set the stage a little bit more about this. Everybody remember back into the early, more Wild West stages of Facebook, right? When it was a lot more clunky. Things would happen you would follow an in Facebook app, right? And then it would post to your timeline something crazy. Or you would buy something and then it would automatically post to your Facebook that you bought that. Or you would get a million Farmville requests, right? These were all of the really clunky attempts from Facebook to monetize, because early on in this whole movement for actually monetizing these startups in the .com bubble, what made Google such a smash success, what made Google the monopoly in Silicon Valley, is the fact that they were able to figure out how to monetize efficiently, effectively, and without the users knowing exactly how the monetization works. So what they were able to do to monetize is what Shoshana Zuboff calls digital surplus, right? And you can tell me if I'm getting too in the weeds setting this up, but essentially digital surplus is what's actually the economic value of your data that you're using on a website. So it's not exactly what you're doing or what you're clicking on per se. It's the data that's left behind from your actions that allows them to predict what you're going to do next. So they run a lot of complicated algorithms with your digital surplus is what it's called. And that allows them to kind of predict and give you what's called targeted ads, although targeting is kind of misleading, right? It's a lot more broad than it sounds. But anyway, Sheryl Sandberg, who, as we mentioned, was an advisor or was actually former chief of staff to Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, was what one an early investor of Google described as the creator of AdWords, and in signing with Facebook, what Shoshana Zuboff described as the typhoid Mary of surveillance capitalism, as she led Facebook's transformation from a social networking site into an advertising behemoth. And so I just wanted to talk about that to set the stage for the fact that we are not going to be able to look to Democrats to be able to regulate surveillance capitalism. We are not going to be able to look to Democrats and neoliberal Democratic leadership to be the opposition that we might think that they would nominally stand for in some capacity. No, they were the pioneers of this big tech kind of monopoly that's emerged in Silicon Valley. And now they're going to be working hand in hand with the Biden administration to curate the news that people are receiving. So I just wanted to kind of give some context.
Well, that's a great piece of context too, in understanding how the right wing was so successfully able to co-opt this faux populist movement, because people like Josh Hawley, who has made cracking down on big tech one of his central themes, has been able to successfully point that out and exploit that reality, the fact that the Democratic Party is by no means populist. It's in bed with these, Silicon Valley companies, this corporate America to an extent, in many cases, which even outweighs the Republican Party's relationship with said entities.
Yeah, exactly. And it's oh fuck, I wrote notes down, but I'm not even going to try and find them. What I'll just kind of go from the cuff on this, but essentially, when Glenn gets into this piece, right, and he brings up, obviously he's very concerned about the kind of crackdown that Silicon Valley monopolies have with the speech policing and the taking down of Parler. And this, what is, I guess, being called and described as a call for a domestic war on terrorism for these neo-Nazi uprising, these Trumpist QAnon.
Yeah, which even AOC, by the way, is advocating for. I saw a really, kind of unsettling tweet where she was basically saying that, the federal government needs to crack down on online misinformation and hate speech. Yeah, I'll try to find it real quick. But that was definitely not a good sign. And obviously we've talked about our relationship with the squad and AOC, but AOC in particular is really wading into some waters that I am just, that really do scare me.
Yeah, and I think that this is kind of the slippery slope of neoliberalism, right? Like right now is where we need AOC to be taking a bold stance that's unpopular amongst even some of the nominal left progressive, right? Because it's super easy for them to, get on board with talking about how we need to ban all these like Trump-esque figures. But, to counter that, we talked about on the other day on the show, the Surf's YouTube channel got yanked, right? This never happens in a vacuum where it only affects the right wing. It always comes around to bite the left. It always comes around to bite channels like the Vanguard, or channels that you might care about more than the Vanguard, like, Secular Talk or Jimmy Dore, or just like these bigger channels that, are also going to be impacted. It doesn't matter if you have 1 million views. That's actually more of a concern to them.
Yep.
There was actually some reporting going around, like BreadTube. I think it probably got covered by like everybody, about how CNN was essentially just like talking out in open about squashing all of these, fringe YouTubers, that because they're pissed off that they're getting more pull than daytime YouTube.
By the way, guys,
sorry.
That's just to let everyone know, that's another reason to follow us on Twitter. In the event that something happens to our YouTube channel, you'll at least be able to keep up with what we do as a, backup option, because that is a possibility that we have to reckon with as a, independent media company that speaks the truth to power. And by the way, here is that AOC tweet that I referenced.
White supremacists, online radicalization, misinformation. These problems don't go away on January 20th, but healing is possible. We can start by properly funding already existing programs dedicated to de-radicalization. See, this is the kind of horseshit that dog whistling from the left, right? Like this dog whistling to neolibs that are, oh yeah, no, we're going to go along with this. I'm going to get my people to go along with your Silicon Valley. MLK wouldn't have liked you. Oof.
Yeah, and again, it's so weaselly because the way she phrases that, it's hard to just disagree with it on the merits of what she's saying. Like, obviously, I want to help combat white supremacy and radicalization and misinformation. Like, of course, those are all problems in our society. Of course, we should do something about that. Yeah, but it's the same thing that was used against the terrorists of 9/11, Al Qaeda and stuff. Well, we got to super zone in on this problem. We got to blow it out of proportion fearmonger about it 24/7 in order to justify funding these programs, in order to justify giving, the FBI and the CIA so much more power, in order to justify, starting an illegal offensive war.
Yeah, exactly. And, Glenn points it out. He says, quote, underlying all of this are immediate insinuations that anyone questioning any of this, and by this he means, crackdown, must, by virtue of these doubts, harbor sympathy for the terrorists and their neo-Nazi white supremacist ideology, which is just patently false, right? Yeah. And, Gavin and I don't have any sympathy for these fuckers, right? But what we do have sympathy for is the fact that free speech is more of an absolute kind of principle for us. And, you don't get to pick and choose what free speech is, right? So who is going to be the arbiter of that free speech if not, this blanket saying yes, right? If the blanket says we don't know, once it's opaque, once it's obscured, that's going to immediately affect all voices that are, quote, marginal or quote fringe, right? And Kyle Kalinske made the excellent point earlier today. I had his show on in the background, that all of these people who are saying, oh, we need to fight terror, censorship. These were all people that were lying about the Iraq war every single day on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, wherever. They were all lying about it, peddling the same lie. And anybody who would have been telling the truth about it on YouTube would have been taken down as, this sort of like heretic, obscure freak. I mean, could you imagine if Michael Moore had a YouTube show after he gave his Oscar speech, after he won for Bowling for Columbine?
I mean, they basically did the equivalent of, internet deplatforming at the time, which was just taking everyone off TV that was in any way questioning the war. They took, I think even Jesse Ventura had like a show on MSNBC or something that got cut as a result of his truth telling about the war. But you can go through I don't have everyone in front of me, but there's like 10 people that got axed from like primetime spots because they were like just ever so slightly critical of our, foreign policy under the Bush administration, completely deplatformed. And, part of the reason why they were able to get away with that in the way they were is because of the lack of the internet and the fact that we didn't have shows, as many shows like The Vanguard or so many others that are in the progressive community now that are speaking the truth to power, that are exposing the crimes of the government and actually talking about it in frank terms, unlike the propagandistic laden terms that you hear referred to constantly on the mainstream media. I mean, like I mentioned this morning on our live stream, I was just watching in NBC this morning, their coverage of the inauguration. And I had just forgotten just how everything they say on corporate media is, slanted in this propagandistic pro-American direction. They never discuss our foreign policy. They never discuss the coups abroad. That's never part of the discussion when talking about, our love of democracy. And that was something they kept talking about this morning. This is a ceremony of democracy. This is all this bullshit. When it's like, why you people never talk about democracy when it's outside of the United States or when it's, being perpetrated on the third world, these coups. So, stuff like that. And obviously that's a little bit of an aside, a little bit of a tangent, but absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that, it goes down to this like greater kind of idea. Like you couldn't, one of the things that I thought, we always talk about Chris Hedges on this show because, like we mentioned earlier with Cornel West, he's one of those just people that we often turn to for moral clarity. He's like one of those wise old comrades, right? That's never.
What did Julian Casablancas call him? He was like called him like the intellectual king or something like that.
Oh, I have to look it up because he said it along with Elder Noam Chomsky.
It was
right?
like I think it was like elder intellectual or something like that, or elder chieftain.
Elder chieftain, yeah, something like that. Noam Chomsky, yeah, and Chris Hedges. You could tell that he like was half amused by Julian Casablancas in that interview and half just like eye rolling, like okay, here's a rock star from Rolling Stone that's here to interview me. Like this guy, like what did you have against George Washington? Was it the slaves? Well, it was a funny interview. It was the fucking like everything else.
Yeah, well, we will still hopefully do a like reaction to that at some point because that was a great interview between two of one of our favorite musicians and one of our favorite thinkers, philosophers, intellectuals.
What I think is so important about a guy like that is that the day after this, massive coup, he is on Democracy Now! Saying, no, I don't think that Donald Trump directly incited violence. He was like, I think Rudy Giuliani directly incited violence. I think, so-and-so could be prosecuted under this understanding. But he was like, if you look at the transcript of what Donald Trump said, he was like, he said that he didn't, think it met the legal definition of that. And that, that was his hardcore position. And I I went back and listened to it, and to me, it's obvious that Donald Trump is dog whistling, but I know that what Chris Hedges is thinking is like, okay, well, 1968, Chicago 7, right? Like, was that inciting violence? Like, the left didn't want that to be tried and found as inciting violence. Well, let's look at the transcripts, like, and to be able to argue that and have the clarity and the just the just not caring that you're going to be savagely attacked by everyone and going to be called immoral, and just having the integrity to walk into that shitstorm, even on a program like Democracy Now!, which is about as left as you're going to get in any kind of like mainstream sense, and still be like far to the left of what they would be considering a normal.
And I'm still a little bit torn, to be honest, on whether or not I do think Trump, met the legal definition or whatever. Because I mean, in my opinion, the fact that almost more than anything that he did say, the fact that what he didn't say, in my opinion, almost is worse. The fact that while the insurrection was ongoing, elected officials' lives were at risk, he sat back and let it happen, and even sent out a tweet.
It's completely unconscionable for sure. I don't want to.
And he also did arguably directly incite a threat or harm towards his own vice president. When people were storming the Capitol, talking about hanging Mike Pence or whatever, he literally tweeted another incendiary comment about Mike Pence, which is pretty much what killed their relationship going forward. So I'm a little bit torn on that, but I ultimately Chris Hedges essentially did convince me of his position, which is that I mean, obviously I agreed with his position in the first place, but I was still kind of waffling, should Trump have been banned?
It's kind of like, you can make up your own mind. I was just saying that I thought that was interesting in the sense that people like him and Glenn Greenwald were few, and I don't even know if you can. I mean, I don't even know if Glenn Greenwald considers himself like a leftist, but I just mean like an outspoken individual with security concerns. And it's weird for me because I mentioned on the show I reread How Would a Patriot Act, and he describes himself really openly as a centrist in that book, which I just think is weird. And I think obviously he's had like some political evolution since then.
He's a weird fucker to put your finger on, like as far as
like I
really respect his
here, and it's pretty interesting. Let's see. Glenn Greenwald was not a political man, not a liberal, not conservative. To his thinking, the United States was generally on track and would remain centrist, but all that has changed. So that's the intro to like his first book, which is interesting, right? Because I think he's been so radicalized since he wrote this in like 2006. But
I wonder how he would describe his ideology, because he really is a fascinating.
I mean, his husband I know is a socialist, but I don't know how he would describe himself.
Yeah, that's true. I do. He was like the only socialist or something, right?
Politics, yeah,
which made both of them a big target of the Bolsonaro regime, of course.
Gay men,
yeah.
Well,
yeah, that too, for sure. So yeah, obviously I have a lot of respect for Glenn Greenwald. His experience brings so much credibility to his thoughts. Same with Chris Hedges, of course. Two of the most intrepid journalists of all time, in my opinion, at least of the modern era.
Yeah. But I think it all gets back to this like greater conversation that we keep falling into the weeds in, because this is so large in scope and it just kind of impacts all of our lives in so many different facilities, because you don't only have to grapple with the actual platform itself, but also the interpersonal relationships that are always kind of creating their own constraints and dynamics on the platforms themselves when you're trying to think about broad strategy from a left perspective. But I guess the only way to kind of do this is to just take it like one step at a time. And what do you think effective resistance looks like to somebody like AOC? Also, Matt Taibbi. I was talking to Gavin about this. We pulled a piece on. I've been a long time reader of Matt Taibbi. Actually, before I even considered myself somebody who was like uber political, I really liked Matt Taibbi because he wrote the intro to the copy of Fear and Loathing in 1972 when I got it, and I loved that book. And then I found out that he was like a more modern reporter. I've read like 5 of his books. He writes like a goddamn angel, and I wish that more people would recognize that. This dude is probably, if we're talking about literary writing and journalism, I mean, Matt Taibbi is probably the best we've got. And, and do I agree and sign off with all of his takes? No, I thought it was cringy as shit when he was like commiserating with Brett Weinstein about like how fucked we were and all that kind of shit. But his writing is so fucking good, and he's really prescient. And, I think his Substack is really valuable, even if not all of his takes are the same takes that I would create. And he had a really good piece on the culture of narcissism that he just put up on his Substack. Really enjoying his Substack presence, especially now that he's left Rolling Stone outside of Useful Idiots podcast. But anyway, back
Taibbi's also a hard one to pin down, how he would describe himself. You know what I'm saying?
So fucking like I the most I've ever gotten out of his personality is from watching Useful Idiots, and it was weird because I read him for a long time before I ever knew what his personality was like. And you know, there's a lot of like shit you can read about how Matt Taibbi used to be considered kind of an asshole. But I don't hold any of that against him.
Who gives a fuck? It's like Jimmy Dore. It's like, I'm not gonna get into like your personal or like when we had
copy on some dude from New York Magazine. Maybe he was an asshole. Like,
or like when we talked to Christopher Halali, and then people were like, well, one time he left his
I don't know if that's true or not.
It's like, I don't fucking, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't want to be the judge of some random dude's character who I'm not familiar with their life. Like, I'm not gonna advocate for the deplatforming of someone who I'm not familiar with. So it's whatever. But
it was cool when the Useful Idiots had Max Blumenthal on. I thought that was ballsy because that was like a little people get pissed off whenever you have Max Blumenthal. I like the Grays on. I'm just saying.
Why did they get pissed off about Max?
Oh, dude, neoliberals fucking hate Max Blumenthal, dude.
I mean, they hate Matt Taibbi too. So
well, yeah, I guess that's true. But people really don't like Max Blumenthal. But anyway,
the Gray Zone actually reports on shit. I mean,
exactly. 100%. It's I'm a big fan. Aaron Mate is another one of my huge journalistic influences.
Same. And we'd love to talk to both those guys on the show.
Yeah, as we grow, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that someday you can see conversations with big named leftists and not just me and Gavin. But
hey, tomorrow there's going to be a pretty good conversation.
Yeah, well, we're super excited to announce that. Yeah, one of our most anticipated episodes ever will be going up tomorrow night. We'll be talking to Thomas Frank, another personal hero to me and Gavin. Kansas born. We were born in the same county as Thomas Frank. When he wrote What's the Matter with Kansas, it might as well be What's the Matter with Us. Those are the fuckers that Gavin and I grew up with and molded our politics as well. So we're super excited for that conversation. Tomorrow we'll be talking about his new book, The People Know, tomorrow, as well as just Midwest populism and that sort of thing. But this long aside, back to how do we effectively message to people like AOC who should be on our side, who should be this, it should be a no-brainer that we need to not like that. We need to rein in Silicon Valley. Yes, but we need to do so by breaking it apart and not by imposing free speech regulations that are only going to be used against left voices, that are only going to be used against the platforms that actually got her into office in the first place. It's almost like this is a clear example of her forgetting where she came from again. Like she doesn't have any concern about the impact that this is going to have on deep left, kind of commentary on the internet, because she's no longer interested in being a part of that, bread tube left.
Yeah. Well, it's
now that she's got your platform.
Well, this actually isn't totally unprecedented with AOC, and actually I'd forgotten about this until you said that, but she was actually also really pushing this whole notion of like, we need to prevent Facebook from
with the campaign ads.
Yeah, it was like, if there's anything that's untrue in a campaign ad, then it shouldn't be allowed up by Facebook, which is like, what do you mean? Like literally half of every campaign ever is just straight bullshit. Like your own candidate, Joe Biden, who you support, I mean, she supported Bernie, but like Joe Biden literally lied to people in Facebook ads saying $2,000 checks. Like that was an ad on Facebook.
He never supported cutting Social Security like a million times.
Two blatant lies among many, many lies from the Democrats this cycle. So what do you mean you're gonna like stop misinformation or whatever on Facebook when that's literally like the game of politics? Like what? So not the first time she's had a questionable, weird, like borderline like pro censorship response to misinformation, which such a big issue. I mean, it kind of is, but like,
I mean, here's
propaganda
the thing, right?
from the mainstream media.
I have an interesting thing. Yes. This was one of the quotes that I pulled on a sticky note. I finally fucking found it. I left it on the page where I first read the passage, but the quote was the key evolution of these companies, right, and their ability to use our data to make money, right, the digital surplus that we've been talking about. It says using the behavioral digital surplus not to satisfy demand, but to create demand. And they talk about how this is a key innovation in surveillance capitalism, right? And once there is the I guess the capitalist incentive to do something to create demand, what are they going to do? They're going to sow division. They're going to sow controversy, because that's where the capitalist incentive is. So unless you change what the profit motive is for these companies, you're not going to be able to regulate this issue out of it, right? So you can't just say, oh, we need to have truthful information go on there, because then any information that's like, who's the arbiter of truth in that capacity? You know what I mean? It's going to be what is status quo, what is, accepted, right? So yeah, and to use a broad analogy, right? If this is 1492, Facebook says that the Earth is round is misinformation, right? Because the Earth is flat at that point. So this you get into that like limitation, right? The scope of conversation is dramatically reduced, which I think is a problem.
And I mean, like, so much of entertainment is bullshit anyway. Like, I believe it was like Joe Rogan's podcast. He had like one of these dudes on that was like recounting his story of alien abduction or whatever. And I watched that shit, and like, let's be honest, I'm pretty sure this motherfucker was not telling the truth. Like, he was lying. Should that be taken off of fucking YouTube because it's misinformation? No, like, it's just fucking podcast episode. Is everyone, the majority of people watching it, understand the nature of the content? At least I hope.
How many things that Joe Rogan has said on his podcast that's not true? He's got like fucking,
I know,
10 million hours of audio.
I know, right? And it's as I remarked to you yesterday, it's funny that he's back to straight alien content after the
back where he belongs, man.
Yeah, back where he belongs, exactly.
I don't have anything bad to say about Joe Rogan as long as he stays in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, just don't talk about trans people and we're good. But
or politics at all,
or politics at all, unless you're gonna have Bernie on or some shit. But like, anyway, the point is, there's already this massive industry based around what is essentially straight up misinformation. It's been mentioned before how tabloid newspapers are full of bullshit. Like, that's an industry in and of itself that literally profits off of just lying to people and aliens and all this crazy shit. I believe in aliens, by the way, but it's not like political misinformation is the only misinformation, and a lot of the stuff out there, it really does blur that line. So you're absolutely right. Who is the arbiter of truth?
We don't want to take Joe Rogan down, because for a while he was advocating that it may be better. Wait, wasn't he on that like all meat thing for a while, where he was like only eating meat with salt and water because of Jordan Peterson?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a bunch of that weird stuff out there, like these weird like diets that may or may not.
Police of that, like if you want to go
exactly
steak every day, I don't give a fuck.
Exactly. Like I mean, there's a lot of alternative decisions that people are led to by alternative communities, and whether or not that's a good thing or not, people have freedom to make their decisions. Like we live in a supposedly free country. You should be able to consume whatever media diet you wish, and as long as you're not literally directly hurting people, like there shouldn't be a ministry of fucking truth to decide what's permissible or not. So I think that's pretty common sense stuff, and it just blows my mind that we're having to have this conversation so many times as a left, as a movement, and even people like AOC, who's someone that's supposed to be one of the furthest left members of Congress, seemingly can't get this through her head. I will give credit to I believe it was Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar who put out this letter essentially saying that like we cannot allow this insurrection attempt to turn into the Patriot Act 2.0 essentially, or another war on terror. They put out a very strong statement saying that this, as horrific as it was, and I agree, it was literal, it was horrific. It cannot be used to, justify another crackdown on our civil rights.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of where it sits for now. I think the left needs to do a much better job of pushing this to, well, I mean, it's tough, right? Like, how do you triage all kinds of this? Personally, I think that the best move is, pushing legislation and making, drawing, I guess, alliances, like a caucusing with, individuals who maybe disagree with us on other issues, but we can find more common ground when it comes to censorship, because frankly, I just don't
I don't know though, because like I said, who's the number one guy that talks about tech and stuff like that on the right? It's Josh Hawley, and that's someone we agree who's a phony. So like,
yeah, I guess that's true, but I mean, I don't know. I think that, yeah, I don't know. I guess.
I mean, obviously, I'm not opposed to working with someone like Josh Hawley. I think Bernie was correct to work with him for the $2,000 checks, and I think that regardless of people's intention, if they end up in the right place at the right time, that's more or less a good thing, and that should be that shouldn't be
it's sad that
excluded.
that's the options that we have, right? Because who in Congress right now is willing to take that bold position against big tech?
Josh Hawley.
Yeah, but I mean, even Ro Khanna, right? Like, I mean, he runs a district. He's running in a district that's right outside of Silicon Valley, and this seems like an issue that I feel like he should be more vocal on. But I'm not seeing that there. I think he might even be susceptible to some of those censorship arguments. So I think the left is really in a pickle here, and it's something that we have to consider. And I think it's one of the main reasons why we need to consider building community on the ground, not digital.
Yeah.
Actual communities, right? I totally
know
the terminology for it. Hubs,
yeah.
Right? Where we replicate, real movement style politics, where we create hubs in your community where it's all about, helping people, creating solidarity. And we've talked about it a bunch of times in the same way that churches have served in the past. We need
I think that we talk about the flaws of Bernie's campaign and the way he exited the race in a way that wasn't exactly productive for the movement. And I think that ultimately one of the biggest issues with the way that he dismantled his race and got out of the race was the fact that he basically just left this leftist force that was so much bigger than the DSA or any of these factions, a united a volunteer army of activists and organizers. He basically just let that dissipate into thin air instead of, before he dropped out, trying to organize those people in a way so that they wouldn't just dissipate into the air, trying to organize them behind what we're talking about right now so that we could have, some sort of like leftist hubs or organizations instead of it just being this disparate sea of ideas and people that have now, we see it devolving into infighting and toxic behavior, all this stuff. So yeah, I think that Bernie really could have, helped guide this movement in a more serious and productive way with an eye towards the future. Obviously, he's old as fuck. He's at the end of a long fight, so you can't really, blame him for not continuing on with as much vigor as I would have. But I do think there's something to be said for that too. And also, I think the reason why so many liberals, even people like AOC, they are so much less. They're so much more reticent to call out the censorship is just because right now it seems like, the liberal class is kind of on top when it comes to making these decisions. It's not the right wingers, or it's mostly right wingers right now.
Comfortable that AOC sees herself with like the liberal power
it does.
And not
it does.
Insurgency wing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's one of the biggest clear signs that not just her, but, a lot of people in Congress that, maybe would have been considered real comrades at one point. We might have to really look at them in a different light because, if they're not standing up for the rights of the people that got them elected, they're not standing up for the free speech of the voices that helped carry their politics to the mainstream of this country. If they're not defending those people, then it's like, why should we defend you, let alone give you our money or vote for you or whatever? So, and I was listening to Anthony Fantano, of all people, who made a really good point because he actually put out a take on the Ariel Pink story, which we've been commenting on.
Oh, gotcha. That makes sense.
And he made a great fucking point that was like, Ariel Pink obviously talks about cancel culture all the time. And that's like why he said he voted for Donald Trump to like help push back cancel culture. He's like, well, Donald Trump represents the, antidote to cancel culture. Whatever. Fantano made a great point. He's like, go back to and like we were talking about during the Bush years, who was one of the first examples, who was one of the first victims of cancel culture? It was the Dixie Chicks because they dared to, speak out against the Iraq war. And then their, fan base of country music listening fucking right wingers.
I remember being a child of one of those, country music listening, white people. And then the reason Chicks then go down.
Yeah, and the reason why that no one on the right wing was, crying and screaming about censorship at the time is because their ideas were the ones that were being, censored against. Not, you know what I'm saying? Like,
100%.
I don't know if I phrased that correctly, but like it was their ideas that were ascended at the time. So they didn't care if dissenters were being, shaved off of the discourse. And similarly, now liberals feel like they're the ones in control of this discourse. So they don't give a shit when, smaller people, channels, voices, whatever are excluded because they feel like, oh, that's just right wingers and they're just crazy anyway. So why the fuck does it matter?
Ariel Pink is a musician that looks kind of like Gavin.
Yeah, I actually am inspired by his aesthetics, certainly. But yeah, you can find a few videos on our channel about him. He's a musician who I held in high regard up until recently when he took part in the Trump rally at DC, which ultimately led to the insurrection attempt. And he's kind of just a blithering idiot that went on Tucker Carlson. he played the victim on Tucker
Into
Carlson.
the warm
Essentially,
embrace of Tucker.
yeah. So again, you can check out our video reacting to his interview if you want to, get some more content, more context on that. Sorry to bring it up again, but something that I thought was worth bringing up. It's not just the left that does cancel culture; it's whoever is the dominant culture. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%. Look at any kind of insurgency that was, led by a I can't even speak tonight. Like, look at any tyrannical regime, right? What do? They squash all the other fucking opposing ideas. It's not virtuous to be, squashing dissenters and taking away their microphone. What's virtuous is saying, I understand that I disagree with you, and I think that the words that you're saying are incorrect, and I will challenge them and create discourse, and we will move forward. However, that just seems to be not the primary takeaway right now, and I think that that's partly to do with the fact what you're saying is that the neoliberal kind of established. It's easy to hate these fuckers, right? They're racist, they're neo-Nazis, they're white supremacists, right? But it all goes back to the ACLU, right? The ACLU has taken so many hardline free speech positions. Folk music was definitely a radical socialist working class music. Definitely stopping mean to people who got healthcare. But anyway, I don't know, and we're kind of talking in circles here because but
definitely a good discussion to have that we'll continue to broach on the future of this show, because obviously the free speech rights, especially in the online era, are so crucial to, so central to many of the fights we're fighting right now. Obviously, we're talking with Joy Marie about Force the Vote, and where was that conducted? Online. I mean, if certain people's accounts had been taken down or darkened by various social media accounts or companies, then we wouldn't have had that, activist momentum. It would have been, nipped in the bud, so to speak. So it's very essential that we, maintain these rights and privileges, and it's also essential, in addition to that, that we, start reframing these ideas in the mind of the public and start introducing the idea of nationalizing social media companies, because as I said at the time, if there's no energy to nationalize, if there's no pressure to make the First Amendment apply to social media companies, then there really is no reason they're going to act as anything other than private companies, private multinational companies, which is exactly what they are.
Right, which is why I don't necessarily support the whole Section 230 repeal movement, which is basically going to try and make these people responsible as publishers. I think that's the exact incorrect maneuver.
Oh, yeah.
I think that they need to be treated much more like, like we mentioned, T-Mobile, AT&T, kind of like telephone receiver, and then at which point then they are subject to the speech that occurs over those phone lines, are subject to the laws and regulations of the, people of the United States of America, not our oligarchic overlords in Silicon Valley. But yeah, I think that definitely moving towards public utility on things like not just the internet itself as in internet services, but of the platforms and the places that we congregate on the internet, which have now become the public square.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, definitely some interesting stuff. And like I said, we'll talk about that. And yeah, I agree. I mean, there was some criticism of this, the fact that it was all online, but I mean, in a pandemic, I think it was actually fairly innovative. Same with the people.
They put a bunch of people to knock on doors for it. They were about, these people don't care about your health. Like, if you do, damned if you don't, kind of a deal.
Exactly. And especially, I mean, so much discourse just happens online now. It's almost just like you might as well, in a time of pandemic, avoid potential, suffering. Why I don't understand how this criticism is valid, because I mean, a lot of activism happens online. How do you think that? I mean, remember the only ever potential viable push to save people like Brandon Bernard from execution, that happened online too. Another unsuccessful campaign, obviously, but there was massive online pressure. People tweeting at Donald Trump, please pardon this man. He's doesn't need to be executed. Stuff like that. There's a lot of good activism that does happen online, and regardless of if it's successful or not, if they weren't online, then it wouldn't happen, at all, or at least not as effectively. So, interesting. But yeah, I guess we can probably, wrap this up for the night.
Yeah.
As we mentioned earlier, we do have a big interview coming tomorrow, so make sure to subscribe. And not just a big interview, but also a cool live stream we're doing tomorrow evening with friend of the show, Ian, from the great YouTube channel Epic Philosophy, and former guest of our show, Spike Cohen, who's actually an anarcho-capitalist libertarian. So that should be a very lively...
Why can I not? I can see her face, but I can't.
Joe Jorgensen?
Yeah, formerly ran alongside Joe Jorgensen on the Libertarian Ticket. We had a conversation with Spike while he was the VP, and we're looking forward to getting his perspective on...
he was also the former running mate of Vermin Supreme when he was running for the Libertarian nomination. So obviously Zach and I are very far from libertarians, at least in the economic sense. So it should be some fireworks, and you'll want to mark your calendars for that. Again, that's tomorrow at I believe 7 Central.
Yeah.
So yeah, mark your calendars for that, guys, and make sure you're here to witness that, because it'll be really fun. And Spike and Ian are both really good and intelligent people that we always enjoy exchanging ideas with. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't, to be privy to these amazing and productive conversations that occur on an almost daily basis at this point on the Vanguard. We really do support it. We're interviewing people on the vanguard of leftist politics. So we are going to keep doing that with your guys' support. Thanks so much.
Yeah, take care, everybody, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. We got a lot of good shit.